Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the sources you share and we'll really dig into them to pull out the key ideas. Today, we're getting into some really fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Sacred knowing, resonance, and that, frequency of joy people talk about.
Yeah, it's quite a mix. We've got two audio sources lined up. The first one is from a podcast, Kyoten, Veda, and the Frequency of Joy.
Right.
It features these two speakers, speaker one and speaker two. And what grabbed me straight away was this really personal idea of Kyoten. It's not scripture in the usual sense. No, it's more like a point where the sacred enters experience and how that connects to feeling joy. It's very experiential.
Okay, interesting. And the second source?
That one's different. It's called voice002.m4a. Sounds like a personal recording, Conversation.
It's a conversation.
About what?
Well, it touches on spiritual experiences, someone's career changing direction, and more insights about joy and what they call alignment.
Okay, alignment. Got it. So our mission here for you listening is to sort of weave these threads together. Exactly. We want to unpack what these sources mean by sacred knowing, see how it resonates, personally, and how it all links up with joy and alignment.
Kind of give you the essence of it without you having to sift through everything yourself.
Precisely. A condensed insight.
All right, let's jump in. This Kyoten idea from Speaker 1, it really wasn't what I expected.
No.
Not at all. It came from like a spontaneous moment on a bike ride, not from studying texts.
Right. And their interpretation is that Kyoten isn't a specific text, but maybe a point of contact, a place where the sacred kind of breaks through into your awareness.
So it's less about knowing something intellectually.
And more about receiving it.
Yeah.
That emphasis on receptivity is interesting. It's not about striving, but about being open.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And how does Veda fit in? Because usually you hear Veda and think.
Ancient scriptures, right? Or Ayurveda.
Yeah.
But they're quite clear in the first source that isn't that Veda.
Yeah.
They describe it as something more primal, a felt sense of sacred knowledge, like wisdom, but, the kind you feel.
Okay, a felt wisdom, not just concepts.
Exactly. They literally say, Veda is not knowledge you understand, it's something you feel. That really shifts the focus, doesn't it? Away from just the mind.
It puts the emphasis on our whole experience, our bodies, our emotions.
Like our senses are maybe the real tools here for that kind of understanding.
Which kind of links to the second source, right?
Yeah.
With Speaker 2 and their work evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. They mentioned starting out teaching English, but it sort of morphed into what they call voice restoration.
Voice restoration. What does that mean exactly?
Well, it sounds like it goes beyond just, speaking correctly. It's about helping people reconnect with their authentic inner voice, their own frequency.
Okay, finding their true resonance.
That's the idea. And there's this quote, I used to think I had to teach techniques. Now I think my role is to help people find their voice.
That's powerful. It suggests it's already there, inside us.
Right. We just need help uncovering it, maybe, not necessarily learning something new from scratch. So you've got this spontaneous insight, Kyoten, and this uncovering of an inner voice.
Yeah.
Both pointing inward.
Exactly. And it's not just confined to special spiritual moments.
Yeah.
Both sources hint at finding this sacred feeling in pretty ordinary places.
Like where?
Well, someone mentions a Church of England, just feeling something faint but there. Another talks about moments on a mountain or just being in nature.
So it's not just in temples or during meditation.
Seems not. Which connects back to that Kyoten idea, doesn't it? If it's a point of entry, that entry point could be anywhere.
Yeah, it's not tied to a specific location or text. It's more about our own perception, maybe, being attuned.
Being attuned, yeah. And that leads right into alignment and joy.
Okay. How are they presented?
Well, crucially, not as just ideas to think about. They're described as actual states of being, frequencies, vibrations you can live in.
Like tuning forks.
Sort of. There's a great line, alignment is not a concept, it's a vibration you return to, like finding your note.
I like that. And the second source, the conversation, digs into this too.
Oh yeah, it really brings it down to earth. There's talk about choosing your frequency, your emotional state, even when external stuff like finances isn't ideal.
Choosing how you feel regardless of circumstances.
That's the gist. And the idea that living authentically comes from that place of joy and alignment, not because you have to do something or because someone else approves.
So it's about what genuinely feels good, what you like doing.
Exactly. That simple act of liking what you do seems really central to their emerging philosophy. It's a challenge to that whole push through the pain mentality sometimes.
Yeah, it prioritizes internal resonance over external validation or obligation.
Which is a big shift for many people, I think.
Definitely. And, both sources seem to suggest that pure logic, well, it has its limits here.
Right. When you're talking about sacred experiences or even healing, trying to analyze it purely logically might miss the point entirely.
So what's the alternative then, if not logic?
Trusting feelings. Trusting that inner resonance we keep talking about. If Veda is something you feel, then learning to trust that feeling becomes, well, essential.
Developing emotional or intuitive intelligence, maybe.
Yeah, something like that. A different way of knowing.
The first source also mentioned personal meditative insights, didn't it?
It did. And the idea that a technique's usefulness isn't universal. It depends on the individual.
On their, emotional state, their readiness.
Exactly, their personal resonance, which again highlights how individual this Kyoten point of entry really is. It's not one size fits all.
The path looks different for everyone.
Seems so. And now that second source, voice 000.m4a, introduces this really specific concept, a separate Veda.
Separate from the scriptures.
Yeah, explicitly distinct from the Ayurvedic or scriptural Veda. They talk about it as a feeling of Veda.
Okay, back to feeling again. So it's a direct sensory experience.
That's how it sounds. Not teachings, but an experience of sacredness. And the goal is to align with that feeling.
And this feeling.
Right.
Where does it show up?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The conversation gives examples of feeling it in very simple, everyday settings.
Like the bike ride. Or
Even simpler sometimes, like feeling a sense of reverence just looking at a garden or near a plain old fence, or watching a mountain at sunset and feeling this sense of wholeness.
wow. So that sacred feeling of Veda isn't just for mountaintops. It's potentially right here in the mundane.
That's what's suggested. It's about our ability to perceive it, to feel that resonance in the ordinary, shifting our perception.
That's quite profound. And they link this feeling to something else too, right? A vortex.
Yes. They mention the Veda, this felt sense, residing within one's vortex, and they connect it to Abraham Hicks' teachings.
Okay. And what's the takeaway from that connection?
A key insight seems to be about prioritizing feeling good or feeling right internally over needing to be factually correct or controlling situations externally.
So choosing the feeling leads to better outcomes, essentially. More manifestation.
That seems to be the idea presented, that our emotional state is the real point of attraction, more so than arguing or forcing things.
Interesting. And this focus on feeling, it also changes how they view teaching or coaching.
It does. The emphasis shifts away from just handing over techniques
Towards what?
towards facilitating inspiration. The idea is that if someone acts from a place of genuine inspiration, the learning goes much deeper. It integrates better.
Rather than just following instructions they don't really connect with.
Exactly. It's about sparking that internal drive, fostering that intrinsic motivation.
And underlying all of this, joy keeps coming up.
Oh, absolutely. Joy is presented as really fundamental. It's seen as an authentic expression, a powerful frequency in its own right.
Even joy needs no justification. That quote really stood out.
It does, doesn't it? And there was that example of a song created spontaneously out of joy, becoming the source of ongoing inspiration. It shows joy not just as an outcome, but as a creative force.
So following joy isn't frivolous, it's actually guidance.
It's presented that way, yeah, as a direct path to alignment, to a higher frequency, a valid compass.
And this leads into trusting that inner guidance more generally, and trusting the universe.
There's this sense of an evolving understanding, moving towards trusting intuition and seeing an inherent order or perfection in how things unfold.
Which naturally brings in the idea of surrender.
Right, but not surrender as giving up, more like trusting the flow, letting go of the need to control everything and aligning with that larger current.
Okay. And finally, what about challenges? How do they fit into this picture?
Well, there's a suggestion to reframe them, to see challenges not just as obstacles, but maybe as rewarding experiences in some way, opportunities.
Okay. How does that work?
Part of it seems to be about focus, focusing intentionally on the feeling you want, like abundance, for instance, even if the current reality looks different.
Because the current reality is just a reflection of past thoughts and feelings.
That's the concept presented, that our present focus, our present feeling state, is what creates the future reality. So it gives you a sense of agency, even within challenges.
You choose where to put your attention.
Exactly. You choose the vibration you want to tune into now.
Wow. Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. What are the big takeaways from this deep dive?
Well, I think the biggest thing is how personal and felt this idea of sacred knowing is in these sources. It's not rigid.
No, definitely not about doctrines. It's about experience, resonance.
Yeah, inner resonance.
Right.
And how joy and alignment aren't just nice to haves, they're shown as pretty fundamental to living authentically.
So Kyoten can be your own personal connection point.
And Veda can be that deep wisdom you feel inside, not just read about.
And finding your authentic voice, your frequency, is really key.
Absolutely. It all comes back to that inner tuning.
Okay, so a final thought then for you listening to maybe chew on.
Yeah.
How could you start noticing or even cultivating your own Kyoten moments, those little points of connection in your day?
And how might you connect more with that feeling of Veda, that inner knowing, maybe trusting your intuition a bit more?
And perhaps the biggest one, how could you consciously choose joy as your guide, your frequency, as you navigate, well, your own deep dive into life?
What feeling deep down resonates as your truth? That's really the question, isn't it?